Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to my channel. So for today's video, I am going to be ranking all of my Huda Beauty palettes. Now, I have all of them in front of me already ranked, and I'm honestly not shocked by how I rank these. So we're going to get into why I rank them, and I'm also going to rank them from least to favorite Huda Beauty palette. So if you want to see all that, then definitely keep on watching. So I currently have 14 Huda Beauty palettes. I feel like she hasn't come out with that many big palettes. She's come out with a lot of more mini palettes, but it wasn't until last year that I really started to get into Huda Beauty, or maybe it was the end of 2020. And then Huda Beauty easily skyrocketed to be one of my favorite brands ever. I just feel like the formulas are so innovative. Any new release that she has, I always need something from the new collection. So I'm excited to rank these. So ranking at number 14 is the Rose Gold palette. Now, this one, compared to all the other Huda Beauty palettes, is just honestly, I love having this palette in my collection because it just shows how much Huda's brand has grown. This palette right here is honestly not a color story that I would gravitate to. I am looking at it now and I'm like, there's some really cute shades, but I'm like, Huda can do so much better than this, and she does do better than this. We're gonna see her formula just progresses so much, and I love it. This one is just not my favorite color story. There's some really great mattes in here to deepen up everything, and I feel like it's very, very, very inclusive as far as mattes and transition shades. But this just isn't a color story that speaks to me. It's like the Rose Gold palette, but I'm not really getting much rose gold out of it. The formulas feel super buttery. But I know that there are some way better Huda Beauty formulas. Don't get me wrong, the formulas in this palette are beautiful, metallic and stunning. But this is the remastered version as well. So the formula is a lot better than what it initially was, because she had a whole thing and people didn't like it. So this is the reformulated one, but this isn't my favorite Huda palette. Number 13 goes to the Toffee Brown palette. This one right here is from her tortoise collection, I believe. I was so excited to get this palette, but when I finally got it, I realized that I can't really deepen up the look that much. I feel like there's not much variation in this palette. I feel like I have to pull from other palettes to use this one, and if we're ranking palettes by functionality on its own, then this one has to be number 13. I like this one just a little bit more than the Rose Gold because I feel like the color story just makes a little bit more sense. It all goes together, but this isn't my favorite. I do feel like her Obsessions palette sometimes can be a hit or a miss, but this one just wasn't my favorite. Coming in at number 12 is the Gold palette. Now, I was so excited for this palette. When I saw that it was announced, it was a Cult Beauty exclusive, and then she finally released it to her website, and when I got it in person, it was not what I expected at all. When I tell you this is a companion palette, it is truly a companion palette. But if I'm comparing these two, which they look super similar, very similar, I would prefer this one only because of the different finishes in the shimmers. There are so many really pretty different formulas. We have some shadow toppers. We have a more glittery, super metallic shade. We have more of a chunky shimmer, but it's really pretty. I just feel like the shimmers in here just rank this palette a little bit higher than the last one. But y'all, I'm telling you, Huda has some really pretty formulas and shimmers in her palettes. I really hope that I don't mess up the count, but coming in at number 11 is the Huda Beauty Desert Dusk palette. This was actually my first Huda Beauty palette, and this just made me fall in love with the brand. This made me want to try out her brand even more. I think this palette is really pretty. I love the purple tones. I get some really pretty looks in this palette. Once again, the formula, if Huda was to take these older palettes and literally use her updated formula right now, I feel like this one probably would be my favorite palette from Huda. But because I know how much better the formula gets, this one isn't my favorite, but I do love this color story a lot. It's just really pretty, and this does hold a very special place in my heart because this was my first Huda Beauty palette, and this got me into the brand. Coming in at number 10 is the Purple Haze palette. This palette is pretty, but it's definitely not my favorite purple palette. It is a really pretty palette, but it is coming in at number 10. So coming in at number 9 is the Khaki Haze palette. I will say this one's really pretty, really unique. I love the fact that when she says khaki, you are getting a khaki palette. This is really pretty. I feel like every time I wear like camouflage or anything, I gravitate to this one, or tan colors. Like today, I would gravitate to shades like this. I do love having this palette in my collection. Sometimes I forget about it, but I do love that there's some really deep mattes in here. I just feel like this is such a unique palette, to be honest, and that's why I really like it a lot. So coming in at number 8, some people might really be like shocked that this is in the 8th place, but it is the Huda Beauty Mercury Retrograde palette. Now, let me explain, you guys. So this palette is really beautiful. I feel like this palette kind of like sparked and started to get Huda into her newer formula, which I feel like this is a palette where she started to really experiment with different formulas and different, like, you know, technologies within the lab. But I will say, as far as like depth and how much variation I can get out of this look, I can't get much out of this look at all, but it is such a pretty palette. I feel like this is a companion palette for me personally. There's literally one shade in the palette that will really deepen up my look. So I always have to use a deepening shade, and there's just this one where I feel like my looks overall look the same, but I like pulling this palette for the like shimmer, like the eye-catching shimmer shades to go on my lid. Because of that reason, this palette is ranked at number 8, but it is really pretty. I just feel like there's way too many lighter toned shades in this palette. I feel like we could have had a little bit more like if like corresponding shades, like a deep purple, a deep blue to match with like the lighter blue. You know, I just feel like there could have been a little bit more variation in depth with this palette, but other than that, it's a really pretty palette. The formula is really amazing, and that's why it is ranked at number 8. We're getting into my literal favorite palettes, okay? So number 7 goes to the Wild Python palette. This one right here is so pretty. This Wild Obsessions collection was my favorite Obsessions collection from Huda. I cannot wait to see what she comes out with this year, but this palette right here is beautiful. This is such a fun palette for the summertime. I love it. I have a full review with swatches and all that stuff on my channel, so I'm not going to swatch everything. The formula is amazing. Like I said, her Obsession palettes can be a hit or a miss, but this was truly a hit. It was truly a hit, and I loved it. The blues in here, the blues and the greens in here really make the palette for me, and it's just so fun, and I cannot wait for the summertime so I can start playing with these shades and those like bright blues and everything. This palette is so good. So coming in at number 6 is the Nude Rich Huda Beauty palette. This one right here, I love this collection just because she came out with a light, medium, and a rich palette to go to like correspond with each different like skin tone, which I love. And I love this palette because it is super pigmented, super rich. The only thing I'm not the biggest fan of with this palette is that it leans very red, but it is still a really pretty palette. I think the formula is really pretty. The shimmers in here are phenomenal. They're just really stunning. It's just such a red leaning palette that I'm just like, dang, Huda, give me the browns, you know? But I guess I get it. It shows up really well, so I have to commend her for this. I don't usually wear reds, but this palette right here does help me to step outside of my comfort zone when it comes to red shades, because I feel like red just always looks not the best on me. I always have to pair red with an orange. So yeah, it's a little bit more to it, but you know, this palette is ranked where it is because it is a really good palette, and I love the concept, you know, and the idea behind it. I just wish it wasn't so red leaning, but it's still really good. Number 5 is the Wild Jaguar palette. Now this palette is one of the most unique palettes in my entire makeup collection. I don't usually do smoky eyes, but when I do, girl, this palette is literally top of the line. I love this palette. It is such a beautiful, sexy palette. It's a great date night palette as well. It is so fun. I love palettes like this that are just so fun and so different. Like, this palette literally is everything. This black is everything. I feel like if you love cool tones, you love smoky looks, you're gonna love this palette. It's so beautiful. This is such a great palette. I'm like looking at it and I'm like, it's so good. I love it. It is very unique. But I will say coming in at number 4 is a palette that I just love a little bit more than that one because I do wear it a little bit more. These palettes are the palettes I wear the most from Huda. So we're getting into the top 4. That was the top 5, but now we're getting into the top 4, but the next one is the Wild Chameleon palette. This one right here is my favorite from the Wild Obsessions collection. This is beautiful, okay? So beautiful. There's reds, there's orange. Like I said, I like to pair oranges and reds together, so I really like this one. I love that really pretty pop of purple. I just feel like this is such a beautiful palette, and I've created some really pretty looks with this palette. It's just so stunning. I cannot wait to see what Huda comes out with this year because this palette really kills it. This is a great summer palette, a great fall palette. I just love how versatile this palette is, and it's just really beautiful, and I'm obsessed with this one, okay? I'm obsessed. If there's any you can get from the Wild Obsessions collection, get the Chameleon one. I think it's really, really worth it. The formula on all 3 is phenomenal, but I'm telling you, the Chameleon one is my favorite one. So number 3 is gonna go to the Huda Beauty Rose Quartz palette, okay? Hear me out. This palette is beautiful. It is a purple toned palette. It is stunning. I love it. I had so much fun with this palette. The shades in here are beautiful. I love it. Like, there are some pretty formulas in this palette. I'm telling you. I'm just going to swatch some here. These formulas in this palette are beautiful. Very beautiful. Full review if you guys are interested in more swatches, if you guys are interested in swatches of the entire palette. But the only thing about this one is it's starting to become a companion palette for me. I'm starting to reach for this palette just for the shimmers because once again, like the Mercury Retrograde, there are not a lot of mattes that deepen up my look. But this palette is so beautiful paired with other palettes. I've been using this palette a lot ever since I got it, and I've noticed that I had to pull from other palettes to get a certain look that I have in mind. This palette is just really beautiful. It's my number 3 palette from Huda Beauty. Highly recommend this one. It is so good. It's very cool tone, so if you don't like cool tones, you might not like this one, but for me, this palette is so worth it for like the, you know, the shimmer formulas in it. So that's what I have to say about that. Coming in at number 2 is a palette that was on my wish list for literally years, and I could not see myself. This was a time when I could not see myself spending $60 on an eyeshadow palette. I didn't really even shop in Sephora during this time, but I think it was like I was in college and I was like, I cannot spend that much money. I always was going to Ulta. I never went to Sephora. Then I got this palette on sale. Huda Beauty had a sale and I got it on sale, and I think it was just one of the best things I could have ever done. It definitely was worth the wait for me. This is the Huda Beauty New Nude palette. I just thought this was the prettiest palette I had ever seen in my entire life. I would always eye this palette down so much every time I came across it. This palette has been duped so many times. There's so many brands that have tried to copy this palette, have literally copied this palette. And I'm just like, it's just that pretty. It's just that good. It's just a beautiful, beautiful palette. This palette is stunning, okay? She has glitters in here. She has a little concealer shade in here, which I think was during the time, I'm not too sure, don't quote me on this, but that was just rare for a palette to have a concealer shade in it. I remember a lot of people were talking about that. It just was so cool. I love this palette, and I love that there is like shades to blend out your deeper shades. I just loved everything about this palette. It's so pretty and I'm obsessed. You guys know these are the kind of tones I go for anyways, so I love this palette. It's a pretty bridal palette too, but this is ranked at my number 2 palette because it is just that good. It's still good. It's beautiful. I love this palette so much. I really, really do. Then at my number 1 palette, which you guys probably guessed this already, it's the palette that I'm wearing on my eyes today, and this one was worth the wait as well. I just got this one the end of last year and it was truly worth the wait. You know you want a palette when you don't like really, really impulsively buy it, but you constantly check to see if it's like, you just constantly check for it. This palette was expensive. I think this was $67. It was like more than 65 and I was like, whoa. But now I'm like, if I want a palette, I'm gonna get it. This is the Huda Beauty Naughty palette. So this is like literally the opposite of this one, but y'all, warm tone. It's warm. It's my favorite Huda Beauty palette ever. I love it. And to say that it's my favorite, like there's some red tones in here, but it leans like brown red-ish. Like my look today is so pretty. It's so like simple, but I love it. Like I used, like there's so much I can do with this palette. There's like, I'm still discovering the shimmer shades. I haven't even touched all the shimmer shades yet because I'm still trying to fill them out and discover what pairs best with what. I'm literally still discovering this palette and I love that. I love a palette that I can literally sit here and be like, okay, what haven't I used today, you know? And like today I'm wearing a new shade on the lid that I haven't worn yet. Like I'm still going through each shimmer shade to like get a feel for it and actually do a look with it. Like I still have like 4 more shades to go to do a whole look with. I love this palette so much. It's so cool. They have that little weird shade in there, which I don't really use. The same with the Rose Quartz palette. I don't know what to do with that shade, but this palette is just beautiful. It's my favorite Huda palette. And I feel like if you love neutrals, but you also love warm tones, you're going to love this palette. And so happy I have it. Literally my favorite palette. This stays like up at the top with me. Like obsessed with this. Like Huda did her thing with this palette. She did her thing. So that was all of my Huda Beauty palettes ranked. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I did declutter some Huda palettes like her pastels. Those were not my favorite. I'm excited to see how much more my Huda Beauty palette collection grows. Let me know your thoughts down below and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye guys.